Hey everybody, welcome back to Greg and my bi-weekly where bi-week God, sorry Greg, my head is like not in the right place.
It's been a day.
It's been a day. But we're excited to be here once more and talk to y'all about birds and bird ID, and we'll take your questions as they come in. So we are live on a number of places. We're live on Twitter, on YouTube, and in Facebook in our What's This Bird group. We're excited to have you here. If you have any questions about birds and bird ID, we want to take them. We want to hear them. We want to help you learn about birds or even just talk about birds because there's nothing else going on. We got nothing else going on here, Greg. All we have is to talk about birds.
Oh yeah, there's nothing happening at all
No
today.
other news
So
other
yeah,
than birds.
yeah.
So we're here. As usual, I have pulled a bunch of...
I've, I've been up. I've been up
Please.
since 1 a.m. thinking about birds.
Me too.
Um,
Dreaming for a world in which all we have is to talk about birds.
exactly.
As usual, I've pulled a bunch of interesting bird images from the ABA's What's This Bird Facebook group, and we're going to talk a little bit about those as we go. But Greg has some interesting things to start with, and we'll get to that shortly. But I just want to say, if you have any questions about birds or birding or anything else that's going on, please, bird or birding related, obviously, please let us know in the comments, and we will get to it. It looks like our comments are working. We had some trouble when I had Ted Floyd on here a couple weeks ago, but we're going to be good.
And thank you, Ted, for filling in for me. I wasn't feeling very well 2 weeks ago, and I went to get a COVID test, which came out negative.
You're
so
COVID free.
back in the saddle here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's November 6th, so it should have all disappeared by now anyway. So what are you
exactly? It's gone. It's gone. And wait, and a welcome to all the people from the Illinois Birding Network on Facebook.
Illinois, love Illinois.
Shared there. We got some content coming from you guys coming up here. So how's the birding been over by you this? I mean, this fall is one for the books.
It has been an amazing fall. It's been an amazing year for North Carolina, where I live. We are on task to add 5 new species to the North Carolina bird list this year, which puts us ever closer to that magic 500 species for the state number. We're getting there. We're like in the 480 somethings now, and boy, if we keep adding 5 a year, we're going to be there before too long. But for me personally, it's sparrow season. The sparrows are starting to arrive. White-throated sparrows are here in place for the winter. I haven't seen a junco yet, but they usually are kind of early November birds. I'm sure they're around. And we've even had a few people reporting evening grosbeaks in North Carolina. So they have made it all the way down here. There have been a report on the coastal plain, photographs even, more than a report, of birds coming to a feeder, and some birds in the mountains as well. And they've come down into Tennessee, and it's only November. So I've not seen an evening grosbeak in something like 25 years. So I think this might be the year that I finally get one.
I was alive and birding for the mega flight of 77, 78. And that didn't kick in until mid-December. I mean, there were maybe a few clues in Wisconsin. Now, of course, we didn't have birders connected the way we do now, so it took most everybody by surprise. But this has been really something. The Indiana Dunes on the very south end of Lake Michigan had a flight of close to 300 evening grosbeaks yesterday.
That's incredible. And I've seen photos from people in Cape May on the southern tip of New Jersey as well. Lots of evening grosbeaks coming down. And these aren't just like dribs and drabs, not like ones and twos. These are like flocks of 10 to 15 birds. I think that's probably the most amazing thing about this is that it's not just 1 and 2. Like in the past, that has been the way it has shown up in North Carolina. It's lots of birds.
Now, talking about evening grosbeaks, back when I was a kid, evening grosbeak was an expected migrant. It wasn't common by any means, but you always expected a couple, and especially in March and April. And they would come through and clean up the ash seeds. And then, of course, they've just kind of disappeared. And the last one that I've seen recently was several years ago in a cemetery in Chicago, and I think it was determined to be the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, really?
Race. Yeah, by call. But I'm just saying that to point out just how like freaky amazing this flight is. And if you're a new birder or have only been birding for a few years, get out and see winter finches,
Yeah.
because this looks like it's going to be a winter
It's
that
one
you're
of
going to
those
remember.
great years. And I have been listening. I've been putting in my earbuds and listening to a lot of different evening grosbeak calls, because I figure that if I'm going to get one, it's going to be flying over first. And I want to get it. They have a very distinct sound. They sound a little bit like house sparrows, like a less kind of shrill house sparrow. The birding beardsman on Twitter described it as a bunch of kids with basketball ref whistles, and
Yeah.
that sounds pretty good. That's what I'm listening for.
Yeah, and surprisingly, one bird that kind of can sound a little bit like it and has confused people is the alert call of Carolina wren.
Oh, really? Well, I got a lot of those
Yeah.
around here, so hopefully that won't confuse me.
But here I this year has been for me sitting in the yard and watching the sky. And I've had a lot of fun doing that, and I've had some great birds fly over my little tiny backyard. And last week we had an incredible day of northwest winds that were gusting to 50 miles an hour, and everybody's like, okay, this is when the cranes and the cold weather hawks start moving. And the hawks were kind of disappointing, which was unusual. But the cranes certainly did move. Anybody that sat outside had thousands of cranes. And when the cranes move, the golden eagles move. And I've been hoping for a golden eagle from my yard for 15 years, and dang it, I got it last week. And it was a beautiful
over in suburban Chicago.
In suburban Chicago, and it was
There
a
you go.
beautiful adult that flew by low. It wasn't a speck in the sky that, I've contorted into a golden eagle. This was like I could see the shining golden nape on this bird. It was
Nice.
Yeah, it was quite a treat.
That's very good. We've actually even had I'm trying to get my levels right. I think like I'm a little loud here, but we've even had a rough-legged hawk already in North Carolina, which is kind of an every other year bird here. And I'm going out in that direction of the state at the end of the month, so fingers crossed that it sticks around, because that's when I still need for North Carolina.
Yeah, so hawks is kind of where I wanted to start this.
Yeah, so shall we go to the PowerPoint? Because you sent me some photos of accipiters. So we'll talk about forest hawks, accipiter hawks, and I've thrown it up there, Greg. So we're starting off here with an image. We're going to go to the pictures that I pulled from What's This Bird in a little bit. We're going to start with a little accipiter tutorial from Greg Neise here. What are we looking at, Greg?
So my reason for starting this off this way is usually what we do here, Nate and I, is we kind of review things that have been submitted to What's This Bird and maybe go in depth a little bit. But this year, right now, I want to be a little more proactive and kind of get people ready for what's coming down the pipe. And as we've
it's not just evening grosbeaks.
It's not just evening grosbeaks, and it's or finches, and all the finches appear to be moving. But there's been northern goshawks have been moving. Not in anything that would be called an invasion or an eruption, but more than I'm used to seeing. And they're around, and people are seeing them. So, and it may, we've got a lot of time to go here. This may turn into something, more than just a scatter shot. So this first picture was taken by Josh Engel at, I believe, either Hawk Ridge or the Ashland Hawk Watch up on Lake Superior. And his photo had the bird on the far left and the bird on the far right in it. And I photoshopped in the bird in the middle.
Oh, so it's not real.
So what we're looking at from left to right is sharp-shinned hawk, Cooper's hawk, and northern goshawk, all juvenile birds. And when you put them out like this, you can really see the difference in the overall structure and shape.
Yeah.
You look at the sharp-shinned hawk, it's very slim with those big paddle-like wings that kind of push forward like it's reaching a rowing.
Flying gavel is what I was told. Like the judge's gavel. It's like a flying gavel because you can't see the head very well. It's just like straight big wings.
Yep. In the middle, we've got the Cooper's hawk with its kind of long for an accipiter wings. and
Flying
narrower.
cross.
Flying cross, we can see the head. It's got the rounded tail. And then the goshawk. Now you look at the goshawk there on the right. The wings are they're broader. The bird is overall heavier. The tail is not as long. It's not as wasted. It's kind of like a brick stuck on the back end of the bird. And a lot of times northern goshawk will give you a first impression of red-shouldered hawk.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
if
definitely.
you get a bird overhead and you're like vacillating between Cooper's hawk and red-shouldered hawk, then you should start.
Yeah, it's a very beauty-o-y accipiter.
Yeah, you should start thinking northern goshawk.
Yeah. I especially love those bulging secondaries, which is always kind of a field mark that people point out in the field guides. So the feathers, the flight feathers closest to the body kind of bulge out a little bit, and definitely compare that to the Cooper's hawk, which is next to it, where it's more of a flat plane on the trailing edge of the wing. So you can definitely see that. It makes the wings look broader, which is, gives it that red-shouldered hawk appearance that you talk about.
And that little pinched at the base appearance much more than Cooper's hawk. So the next image.
Got it.
Let me know when that's up. Okay.
It's up.
That was taken by Ken Reinert in Genoa, Illinois last week. No, not last week, 2 days ago. And what I did is I put so the bird on the left is the picture that he took. And that is a really nice looking and great photograph of a juvenile northern goshawk on the left. And on the right is a Cooper's hawk in the same plumage. And you'll notice, just going from top to bottom, the goshawk has more of a supercilium, although Cooper's hawks can show that.
Eyebrow.
Yep.
In layman's terms.
Yep. The underside, the base of the underside isn't bright white. It's got like a creamy wash to it. And, everything we're talking about in these juvenile birds is variable, but this is something they tend to show. Everyone I've seen has had this kind of creaminess to the underside. And notice the pattern on the mantle, the shoulder of the bird, how different it is. We've got a sort of a scalloped pattern on the goshawk, and more just like flat brown with these big white spots, or whitish fringes on the feathers that give the shoulder and the wing panel a very different look. Going down the bird, you'll notice the bright white fluffy undertail coverts of the Cooper's hawk. Take a close look at the goshawk and you'll see streaking down there. And that is extremely variable, but northern goshawk almost always, very, very, very often, shows streaking on the undertail coverts.
So, Greg, Jenny Shockley points out that goshawk has some seriously thick legs. Is that a typical thing you see on the goshawk? I don't have very much experience with goshawk at all, so.
It does. It's not when you're, it's not something that you're going to notice. It's something you're going to notice in the photos once you get them home and look at them, but it's probably not something you're going to notice in the field and go, aha, that's a goshawk because of its thick legs.
Yeah.
Because you're just looking at everything else.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And then going further down the bird, look at the tail, and that'll take us to the next image.
Before we go, I do want to point out how and you may end up, pointing this out too, but boy, the tail, like, even though the goshawk is altogether much larger bird, its tail looks a lot shorter than that Cooper's hawk, and that's probably what you're gonna show as I move on to this next image here.
And if if we looked at that flight shot in the beginning, it proportionally is it's a shorter. It's not as long and lanky and wasted.
The proportions are different for sure.
Exactly. So let me know when that next picture is up.
It's up there, Greg.
Okay, so these are two birds that I took pictures of in Lincoln Park in Chicago. And I think if they're not in the same tree, they're pretty darn close. These are both in Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. The one on the left is a northern goshawk, and the one on the right is a Cooper's hawk. And you'll notice right away the very different pattern on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And this goshawk was just wonderfully patterned bird.
It's almost buff, like it's a real pale.
And it's got this, and it had a real creamy underside, and it's just a really beautiful bird. But the thing I want to look at here is the tail. And you'll see that the tail looks, like you said, a little bit shorter. But look at the pattern. So what we've got on the goshawk is we have the bands are uneven. So at the quill going down the middle of the feather, the bands don't meet perfectly. They're offset like this a bit. And each band has a pale edge, a pale fringe that makes it stand out.
Yeah, it definitely
now you compare that to the Cooper's hawk, and the bands go straight across the quill, and there's no pale edge. So keeping these things in mind, the undertail coverts, the shoulder and the tail, a perched bird, no matter what angle you can get it from, there's a really good clue waiting for you.
Yeah,
if you know to look for it.
Yeah, that's so. When we're thinking about timing of goshawks, we're seeing a lot of grosbeaks coming through. Pine siskins have been in for about 6 weeks now. Red-breasted nuthatches obviously also coming through in large numbers. Do goshawk come in with them, or are they sort of following? They're like a lagging indicator of this eruption season.
I have never experienced a goshawk eruption. The two that we've had in Illinois, one was just before my time, and the other one was when I was doing most of my birding in South America. So the conventional wisdom with goshawk eruptions is that it's tied to snowshoe hare populations, because that's one of their main sources of food. And when the snowshoe hare population crashes, the goshawks move en masse. I have no idea what's going on with snowshoe hare populations up north right now.
Got to talk to those Manitoba woodsmen, the same people that Tyler Hoare gets on his winter finch forecast. Maybe you should keep an eye on that.
I will call them
snowshoe hares
now, and we'll see what the snowshoe hare population is doing.
Yeah. That's really interesting. In North Carolina, we get them from time to time. Like it's not really associated with anything. It's just like sometimes we'll get goshawk here and there, but never feels like never more than one or two. The old timers say that they used to nest in like the Appalachians up in the real high elevations, but it's one of those things that's never really been proven, although they have been seen in the summer sometimes up there. But goshawks are weird birds like that. Like they don't let you know what they're in on it. They're moving on their own volition. Nothing you can predict.
And they're if you're used to Cooper's hawks being bold, goshawks tend to be even more bold.
Mm-hmm.
This bird in this picture that we're looking at flew through a crowd of people on the zoo grounds at kneecap level, chasing. I don't know what it was chasing, but there were 100 people walking, milling about on one of the plazas at the zoo, and this bird launched from this tree and just flew at kneecap level at blinding speed, and just zipped right through all these people. I'm like, what was that?
Yeah, I do recall a time. This was a few years ago when someone reported on eBird a northern goshawk at Body Island Lighthouse Pond, which is out on the Outer Banks. And when they reported it, I tend to be skeptical about those sorts of things. And I was like, there's no way. There's no way they got a goshawk. They claimed to get some photos. And I'm like, all right, fine. I'll wait for the photos. We'll get the photos. And then they attach the photos to their eBird checklist. And you can find these on eBird. Just go look for North Carolina goshawk. It is this amazing series of photos of a northern goshawk like bearing down on a pintail that was like sitting on this pond and doing that crazy twist and turn thing they do when they're flying in. And it's amazing. And that tends to be how they show up when they show up in the South. You don't expect it. And then someone puts some photos up and it's your jaw drops. Right. So,
yeah.
So, all right, let's move on to our next image. These are some of the stuff that I have pulled from, What's This Bird just in the last few days like I usually do. And we'll kind of talk through them. Some of them indicate issues that birders might be seeing across the ABA area, across the U.S. and Canada right now, just in terms of birds that are kind of showing up. And some of them are just kind of interesting photos that I thought would be kind of fun to talk about. So here's the next one. And what we have here is a bird that superficially looks like something that a lot of birders might be seeing, but this is status and distribution. We always harp on that, but here's another opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, and when I first saw this picture, I've been kind of scatterbrained for the last week or so, like everybody else has been. And I glanced at this picture and totally flubbed it on first glance. And, now looking at it, it's pretty obvious what this bird is. Mm-hmm. But you could mistake this bird for a flycatcher. Yeah. You could mistake this bird for a ruby-crowned kinglet. Or possibly a warbler. Yeah. And it's none of those.
Yeah, this is one of those classic kind of brain birds, a bird that doesn't automatically come to you as we see. Like when I'm scrolling through what's this bird, it pops up and you think, oh, ruby-crowned kinglet, because it's got the double wing bars, it's got the apparent eye ring, it's kind of small and big-headed and olive brown all over the place, not much to go on. But if you look a little bit closer, and also you look at the status that we think about status and distribution, where and when this bird's photo was taken, it's Tucson, Arizona, which automatically should throw up some red flags. Not that there can't be ruby-crowned kinglets there, because there are, but there's another bird that can be found in the southwest and the western part of the continent that looks a lot like ruby-crowned kinglet, but tends to have a much thicker, larger bill, like this bird clearly has, and that is
a bird that does not have the black third wing bar that is one of the key marks of kinglets. So below the two white wing bars at the base of the secondaries and primaries, it's black, and it forms like a black drop shadow that causes the wing bars, the wing coverts, to sort of appear to pop off the wing a little bit,
sort of like a bay-breasted warbler.
Yeah, and another thing about this bird is that it's got, for a bird this small, kind of thick gray legs. If you get a good look at a ruby-crowned kinglet from this angle, the legs they look like just little, they're tiny, thin little
toothpicks.
little black toothpicks with little orange pads on their feet. And you can really see that from an angle like this. But all of these things put together make this a Hutton's vireo.
Hutton's vireo, one of the frequently forgotten birds in your checklist, I think. Though birders in California and the Southwest definitely have to have it in their minds a lot when they're, especially this time of year. But yeah, Hutton's vireo it's like a lookalike, like a big brother of the of ruby-crowned kinglet, but they're not related very much at all. Yeah. So why they look the same, I don't know. But interesting bird, and I always take an opportunity to talk about status and distribution and kind of soft field marks like that, because those are really important. So let's throw up another one. Here's another one from Lisa Walker, who has their little name there in the corner. This is a bird that she photographed in Lompoc, California. I don't know exactly where that is. Do you know where Lompoc, California? I suppose I could look.
I don't.
Wikipedia.
But what we have here is a dark, what I suppose that you could possibly mistake this for a ruddy duck, but it's one of the scoters, and we're the only thing that you can mistake a scoter for really is a ruddy duck, and there's a lot of reasons why this isn't a ruddy duck. One is that it's got two very rather bold white patches on the face, and ruddy duck tends to have just sort of a pale face with a dark crown. Now, black scoter can look a lot like ruddy duck. But this isn't either of those, so we're going to move away from that. This is either a white-winged scoter or a surf scoter.
Yeah, indeed. And I imagine, although I don't know for sure, that this photo was taken on salt water, which tends to be where you find these. These are the scoters are what we call sea ducks, though it's not uncommon this time of year, especially as they're migrating. They breed in sort of up the taiga in Canada. well inland in a lot of cases, but they'll migrate across the center of the continent. So sometimes weather will put them down on lakes and whatever in the middle of the continent. But by and large, these are mostly associated with salt water along both coasts.
Yeah. So I believe what we're seeing here on the base of the bill is reflection. The bill is wet.
Santa Barbara County. Sorry to.
Yep.
So Southern
just
California.
Saw that from Carl Bendorf. Hi, Carl. I think we're looking at reflection on the base of the bill. That's not white feathering. One of the key ways to tell white-winged from surf scoter is that white-winged scoter has white feathering that goes over the base of the bill to the nostril. And we can see here, though, that there's like a division we can see a dark line between the base of the bill and the white spot. So I'm going surf scoter on this one.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree too, although this does have a few kind of tweener characteristics that might make you lean a little bit towards white-winged scoter, and I think those are mostly photo artifacts rather than actual things we're seeing, as you pointed out there, Greg.
Yep.
The bills of the two birds, white-winged and surf scoter, are shaped similarly, but a little bit different. So, surf scoter has that honking, big, almost triangular bill. So it's like a right triangle. And white-winged scoter is a little bit more of the ski slope, kind of with a dip in the middle. And this one does look a little bit like it's got a little bit of a dip, especially up in the forehead. But as I say, I think that's more about kind of the angle we're looking at this bird. It's a little bit off directly perpendicular. So it gives it a little bit more of a slope. But for the most part, that bill is pretty well triangular, a very thick base. And that looks good for a female surf scoter. This is as good a time as any to point out that if you have any other questions, just general questions about birds, birding, whatever that's been sort of weighing on your mind, please ask it. We'll be here for at least another half hour or so. So we're happy to take those questions and answer them and talk birds because talking about birds is fun.
Maureen, I'm reading down here. Maureen Meehan, I hope I pronounced that right. Meehan. She says, I saw for the first time what appeared to be a crow funeral. I have never seen so many crows gather in this area before. I did not see the dead crow. I was in a swampy area, but about 150 crows streamed in and gathered around, taking turns flying down to the ground and perching on the trees, making loud calls. I have read about it, but it was incredible to watch. I find it hard to handle that it is legal to hunt these birds, but what do you expect from people? Boy, there's a lot to unpack there. I think what you saw were crows mobbing something.
Could
be. And that thing was, it could have been a coyote. It could have been a house cat. It could have been another bird like a hawk or an owl. But crows will do that, and they will gather in large numbers and escort a predator from their territory. And a lot of times when you're following the crows, whatever they're chasing will see you before you see it and move on. So you don't know, like, what are these crows doing here? And then the crows will start to dissipate after whatever it is they were mobbing moves on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I keep hitting my microphone. I think that's probably a pretty good explanation. Though crow funerals are a thing. It is a real thing, and if you're interested in just sort of crow biology and all that stuff, I would suggest going on to Twitter and following Dr. Kaylee Swift, who does a lot of interesting corvid research and shares it publicly. She's a great science communicator. So I don't remember her Twitter handle offhand, but Kaeli. I actually talked with her on an episode of the American Birding Podcast about a year and a half ago about crows and just cool crow stuff. Crows are corvids in general are fascinating birds. But she has seen crows in the area, but not this many. I would suggest that might be just because crows are gathering up in big flocks right now in the winter. That's a pretty typical cold weather thing with crows, and there's just more of them doing everything.
Yeah, the winter flock in Lincoln Park, when I worked there as a photographer and walked the grounds every day, you'd see all year round, you'd see 2 or 3 or 4 crows on zoo grounds. And in the wintertime, the winter flock grew to be 100, 150 birds.
Could be a lot of them, yeah.
And
I have another question from at JulieB99 on Twitter, who asks, been seeing a lot of northern gannets off the south side of NYC Harbor, New York City. Are they migrating through, or is it the first time you're seeing them? Why not both?
Yeah.
But they are definitely moving right now. They breed on islands in eastern Canada, primarily in the North Atlantic and up around Greenland and even up to Iceland, and actually all across the North Atlantic. There are massive northern gannet colonies in Scotland, and as you know, if you go over there too, and yeah, they kind of filter down south, as far south as Florida. And so, here I live in North Carolina, and I always think of northern gannets, flocks of northern gannets, as a pretty common sight in the winter off the shore. If you just go to the beach anywhere in North Carolina and look, you see big white birds flying out way beyond the surf, diving into the water. Maybe it's the first time you've noticed them, but there are definitely northern gannets moving, and there are a lot more of them now than there were, a few weeks ago. So you're inclined to see them. And we also have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Did you have something to say about gannets, Greg?
No, not really.
And we have a question from Carl about frigate birds.
Well, this hurricane season, this hurricane season has been, again, something for the record books. And it's just been like this continual train of hurricanes coming into the Gulf since September.
Yeah, all taking more or less the same track, which has been pretty wild too.
Yeah, I mean, poor southern Louisiana.
Poor Louisiana.
But it's been pushing frigate birds all over the place, and they've been everywhere from Colorado to Ontario, Illinois, Ohio.
Just this last week, there were magnificent frigate birds reported from Missouri, Colorado, New York, Ontario. I might be missing some. I apologize if I have, but yeah, and it's not
Indiana.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's not just, it actually means something that there was a hurricane that kind of made passage up the Mississippi River Valley and blew all these things in. And last week around this time, we have really strong winds where I live, and anytime you have those big strong winds, they're just going to blow a bird like a frigate bird, which does not weigh a lot and will just kind of go with the flow, literally, and end up inland. I mean, the 10 days after a hurricane are the frigate bird days.
Yeah, and the frigate birds. There was a study, and I'm gonna mess this up, I'm sure, but get on the Google and Google frigate birds. How long do they stay in the air?
It's a long time.
They put some trackers on them, and these birds can stay in the air for, I think, like a month at a time.
Yeah,
just soaring around without ever without ever landing. So they get up and they can fly effortlessly, hundreds and hundreds of miles.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon for tropical storms and hurricanes to bring a lot of seabirds or shorebirds inland. Things like laughing gulls and royal terns and sooty terns are always kind of classic storm waifs. But when the storm passes, those birds do not usually stick around very long. Like, they'll get their bearings and they'll start heading back towards the ocean. But as Greg says, frigate birds, man, they will just cruise for a long time, and they will take their time getting back to salt water. It's pretty wild.
And while we're talking about vagrants and storm waifs and things like that, there's another thing happening that it happens to a certain degree every year, but I think we're seeing a little bit more this year, and we'll see how it plays out in November. We're just starting November, and November is typically, we think November.
Hashtag
because
November.
November is east of the Rockies. It's, just about anywhere, but especially east of the Rockies. It's, I think, the most exciting time.
Vagrant season. Yeah,
birding. It's vagrant season.
Yeah.
And that's western birds moving into the east. Birds that normally stay west of the Rocky Mountains or in the Rocky Mountains come east. And just this week we had an Anna's hummingbird, which is a Pacific Coast bird. But we had an Anna's hummingbird in Indiana, and there was one in Wisconsin as well.
Sorry.
had things like, ash-throated flycatcher, and I believe there was earlier this fall there was a sulfur-bellied flycatcher in Canada.
Yes, in New Brunswick.
In New Brunswick, we've had painted redstarts showing up everywhere from
All
Minnesota
over.
to the Carolinas, in New
common
York.
cuckoo in Rhode Island.
That's
different
something
different
completely
phenomenon,
different.
but it's Novembered for you.
It's Novembered. As it starts to get, as the weather starts to turn, you'll see more of that. And I'm wondering just how much things like the fires and droughts and so on out west are going to affect that. And, birds are going to scatter. And, if you go on the ABA website right now, we have a feature article on our front page about mountain birds moving into the Great Plains, things like mountain chickadees, scrub jays.
Yeah, it's a thing that's happening. There was 2 yellow-eyed juncos, one in Kansas, which represented a first state record, and another in El Paso, Texas. So that's part of that phenomenon, I imagine, as well, because I usually associate that as like a Sky Island sort of bird, like highlands of the Southwest. That's
a tropical, subtropical junco that just doesn't move, and they're moving around.
It's a cool bird.
And Rosemary asks in the comments, says she's from Eastern North Carolina, and her bird feeders seem to be staying pretty full. Is there just a lot of natural food out there now, or what? And I think the answer to that is yes. It's not really cold yet. I mean, I still have insects flying around in my backyard. And
a lot of berries, a lot of fruiting trees are fruiting right now. There's a lot of natural food right now, and it will probably stay that way until the first frost.
Yeah. When it gets cold, then the birds will hit the feeders.
Yep. In the Southeast, we tend to have at least some natural food throughout the year. Like even in the middle of winter, we have wax myrtles are fruiting and things like that, and cedar berries. So there's a lot of natural food out there, even in the coldest part of the southeastern winter. But still keep that feeder out. You never know what shows up. If you're in eastern North Carolina, put some jelly out, because there's tons of Baltimore Orioles that overwinter in the eastern part of North Carolina.
You might get an Oriole that's not a Baltimore Oriole.
Exactly.
If you can keep oranges and jelly out, do it. Now, Ben Lisdis. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Ben.
He says, speaking of cuckoos, any seasonal trends observed with those transatlantic vagrants? And I'm going to answer that with the phrase of the day. It's too early to call.
But I mean, it's not uncommon for those sorts of birds to show up in November. If we think of a bird that migrated perhaps in wherever these common cuckoos are coming from, it's impossible to know whether this is a common cuckoo from East Asia or a common cuckoo from Europe, because I think a bird in Rhode Island could theoretically be either. And so if it's an East Asian bird, if it just did a 180-degree migration, so it went north instead of south like it should have gone, you just follow that track over the top of the globe, and you end up in Rhode Island. And if it's a bird from Europe, then usually those birds are kind of weather dependent. If there's like a cold front or a storm in the North Atlantic that's what's kind of going to drive them. And, that could be it too, because we had a northern lapwing in Nova Scotia this week as well. And so, that sort of phenomenon could be driving migrating European birds across the North Atlantic, which is it's hard to tell.
And we have had a little uptick, more than usual, northern wheat ears in the lower 48 in southern Canada.
True. That was a thing. Yep.
This year. But going back to the cuckoo, search Facebook or eBird for the photos of this bird in Rhode Island. People have been getting killer photos. But look at the wings on this bird. Cuckoos have long tails. They're long birds, but the common cuckoo has incredibly long wings, and these birds can fly great distances.
It's a Afrotropic migrant. So that's a bird so we think about neotropic migrants that have to cross the Gulf of Mexico. Well, they have to do it in Europe too, except it's the Mediterranean Sea and the Sahara Desert. And so this is a bird that is built to, they winter in sub-Saharan Africa and they breed across Europe. And so they got a long way to go too.
Yeah, and they're reminiscent of falcons in flight.
Very much so, yeah. Jenny Shockley asked about getting Baltimore Orioles in South Carolina as well. Yeah. In fact, they're more common in the winter than they are in the summer. Put out some jelly or some oranges and see what you can get. We had a lady in, I want to say Craven County, North Carolina, which is in the coastal plain, who had, or maybe it was Pimlico, who put out a bunch of oranges and had like half a dozen Orioles all through last winter, which was pretty cool. Baltimore Orioles. Maureen Meehan asks, pretty sure she saw Baltimore Orioles with robins yesterday in Dutchess County, New York. Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're kind of late migrants. They're tough birds. They'll hang around on mild winters. All right, shall we go to our birds again?
Yeah, what do we got here?
That was a long digression.
That's all right.
All right, so here's a photo
we got nothing else. I got nowhere else to be.
Nowhere else to be. Yeah, so this is a photo from Mason County, West Virginia. So it could have been taken anywhere in the lower 48, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
It's a duck. So we're coming into November, December. That's duck fall, the last of the migrants to come through. They're usually not in their wintering places even until January or sometimes even February sometimes. But yeah, so we've got a couple female type ducks here, but I think we can identify these things. What are you sort of looking at on these birds, Greg?
Well, they look petite and cute.
They do indeed.
And that is in our area teal. So these are teal, and what we can see, we can't see the slam dunk mark of what these birds are, which is the butt. But I'm gonna go with GreenWinged Teal on these birds based on the bill shape and the face pattern.
That was my impression as well. GreenWinged Teal.
Blue-winged teal tends to have more of a spatulate bill,
indeed,
than this kind of thinner bill, and it tends not to have as much of a face pattern as green-winged teal does.
Yep, I agree with all that. Blue-winged teal's closest relative is northern shoveler, so they do tend to have a profile that looks a bit more like a northern shoveler than a green-winged teal. Green-winged teal, one of those ducks that's actually not too difficult to identify, even in flight at a long distance, just because they have that tiny little body, tiny little bill. They look like little bees, little flies. They tend to have real compact flocks. Not that you can see this, but that's something to kind of keep an eye out for.
And it's always amazing when you see them in flocks of late shorebirds, how small they are, because
they're really small.
They're not much bigger than a dowager.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, they're real tiny. In fact, I've seen, in the fall when you're looking at mudflats and scoping mudflats and looking for shorebirds, and you can see teal, greenwing in particular, like just waiting around on the mudflat like a giant shorebird. And when you see them next to a dowager, as you say, like they are tiny. They're little tiny things. But yeah, greenwing teal on this one. And there's actually a third bird here that I'm going to kind of pull over. You can't really see it all, but I don't know if you want to take a crack at that one. I have a guess about what that bird is, just based on what we can see. We can't see the face. We can pretty much only see the back of the head, and you can see the butt at least. I know you like duck butts there, Greg.
Well, I can only see the butt on this bird sticking out on the right side of the image. I see white in the tail, which narrows it down to two birds, two ducks, and I'm going to go. Well, I think northern shoveler on that. Oh, there we go. What is it? Oh, that changes. Wait.
I have a guess on this one.
I'm a northern pintail.
That's what I'm thinking. Yep, that was my guess. It's just like
pintail.
That real nice smooth beige on the back. It looks very much like a female pintail.
And look at the shape. And look at the shape of the tail now.
Yeah.
I'm not. The amount of white in the tail looks. Maybe there's some artifacting going on there, but that's a northern pintail.
Yep. Yeah, and that that pattern, kind of spotty pattern on the back, just real elegant looking. Yeah. Always what I think of when I think northern pintail.
Nice for puffy sure. Head.
Definitely. All right, pintail. Yeah, checkerboard, says Jay Kingbird. I think that's John Lowry actually. On Periscope, he agrees with us. All right, so we got a couple more. We got more. Oh man, we got three more.
Well, we
got to roll through these quickly.
If John agrees, then that's what it is.
Put it in stone. All right,
Yep.
we got another one. Here's this is a warbler, and while the balance, most of warbler migration has been over for quite a while, there's still a few birds trickling through, and this is definitely one of them. It's also from Progresso Lakes, Texas, which, while I don't know exactly where that is, I do know where Progresso, Texas is, down in the valley. It's awfully green there. It might be the valley. Yeah, let's. This is a bird this is going to be a very late warbler. So what I'm looking at is that kind of gray hood, olive, no wing bars, real tiny little bill, broken eye ring.
Yep.
Yeah, tiny little sharp bill, broken eye ring, so you can see the arc on the top and the arc on the bottom, and it's broken at the front of the eye and the back of the eye. Although we cannot see this bird's namesake field mark, which you almost never do. But
yeah,
this is an orange-crowned warbler.
it is indeed.
Yeah.
Quite common in South Texas in the
Yeah,
fall.
a lot of those. All right, so any questions, internet, about
I
orange-crowned
don't see
warblers?
anything. Jenny
lot of-
Shockley says she's learned something new about me today, and I'm like, I don't know what that means.
I think it was the duck butt crack I made that you may have just ignored.
I did ignore. I didn't even hear it.
It's appropriate.
I was looking at the bird.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, so orange-crowned warbler, we did this a couple weeks ago with Ted. We had a real nice western subspecies of orange-crowned warbler that was like green all over and like super bright. This is definitely one of the eastern ones, and I don't recall what the scientific name of the eastern birds are, but this is kind of indicative of the ones that we see in the eastern part of the continent, where they're kind of gray hooded and real olive and bland and kind of monocolored. And also you can see the undertail. It does sort of look like a Tennessee warbler a little bit, but you can see the undertail coverts there, which is the immediate part of the body right underneath the tail, and it's kind of beigey too. Under a Tennessee warbler, those would always be kind of very bright white. What do we got here? A very dark shorebird from Oak Island, North Carolina. That's in my neck of the woods.
This is a confusing bird. Because there's nothing. This is a confusing bird because there is nothing in the picture to give us any sense of size.
No. I mean, you can judge it by the grains of sand.
You can, I suppose so, but I've seen big sand and little sand, and all kinds of sand. And boy, is this! I mean, it is it appears black here.
Yeah.
And I can't tell if this is just the contrast in this picture has been set too high.
No, it looks good to me.
Makes it appear that black because I've kind of like been, as we've been talking, kind of looking at this thing and running down the list of possibilities.
It looks digiscoped because of the kind of the distortion on the outer sides of it. But whoever took the picture, and I forget who it is, and I apologize if you're watching, did a nice job, getting the bird itself in good focus.
Yeah, but as I run down the list of birds that could look like this, dark, sitting on a beach like that. I mean, you can run through Jaegers, you can run through all the shorebirds. My gut keeps coming back to purple sandpiper on this bird. Yeah,
and that is that is what I think as well. And although even that is weird because you don't typically see purple sandpiper, though it is a sandpiper. They don't typically pipe on the sand. It is a rock piper, at least in North Carolina, where they can be found year to year on like the rocky groins and pylons and things like that. But but that's what this is. It's purple sandpiper, but it is super dark, and you can see, and you don't always see this in purple sandpiper when they're kind of tottering around on the rocks.
Yeah.
Boy, that thing has some long wings.
Yes.
That kind of surprised me. I've seen a lot of purple sandpipers in North Carolina, but I've never seen one like this.
I've never seen one this dark.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of purple sand. I was just going through photos of purple sandpipers this week. And I can't remember ever seeing one appear this dark, but that's what it is.
Yeah. Neat. We have Alexa Glenn asks, I would love help with bird ID. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. We're happy to take them, and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Ben Lisda says, aside from range, why not black turnstone? That's a good question. I have to look at black turnstone on my.
Are you gonna answer that?
Range. That's my main thing.
That's it.
When I think about turnstones, there's something about the head that doesn't look quite right for a turnstone to me. Like the placement of the eye and the shape of the forehead and the crown. It's not really something I can put into words very well, but
I just
feels more calidrous than Ardenna.
I just jumped over to where this discussion is going, and the person who took the picture, who is Flita Chauvin, and boy, I probably butchered the daylights out of that, has a second picture of it, and I'm going to put the link in here for Ben.
It's a little bit better, isn't it?
And you can click there. It won't show the picture up, but if you click that link I just put in the comments, you'll see that it is the bird's head is up, and you can see it is definitely a purple sandpiper.
And I think the pattern on the wing coverts, like the kind of pale edging to the wings, is definitely better for purple sandpiper, whereas black turnstone would be streaky, kind of have like streaks in the center of the feathers that would give it kind of a lined, like vertical lines rather than horizontal lines, and scaly. So,
and as Chris, and without diving into the books here, we throw these up. Nate and I do not, by the way, we do not rehearse this. Nate throws the pictures up.
High wire bird ID.
These pictures are picked moments before we come at you live, and I don't know what the heck he's throwing at me, and half the time he doesn't know what the heck he's throwing at us.
Good point. I just pick interesting looking photos for the most part.
But but as Chris Ortega points out, all these things, as you talk more about this bird, turnstone typically shows some sort of pattern on the face, a faint supercilium. It's got more. The pattern is different, and as you start thinking through it more and more, all of the other choices just kind of go away and leave you with purple sandpiper.
So Jenny Shockley says she's never seen a purple sandpiper. I know, Jenny, you live in South Carolina. If you go out to Huntington Beach State Park in the middle of the winter and go to the jetty at Huntington Beach State Park, that is probably the single most reliable place in South Carolina to see purple sandpiper. They're very localized. Once you get down to the Carolinas, they're on those rock jetties, which is why seeing one tucked away on sand is so unusual.
And when you're out there on the rock jetties, they go into the crevices and they climb down into the crevices, and they can bundle up like this and look like a rock. Mm-hmm. And they're very they're very tame, and you can. Yeah. I know of situations where people have literally stepped over a purple sandpiper that went down into a crevice while they're looking at it, and they walk past it.
Bright orange legs too, which are cool.
Yes.
All right, so we got one more photo here. Okay. Little falcon here. We're still doing raptors.
Finally, we got one that's just very straightforward.
Pretty straight ahead, yeah. But the conversation here was, why is this not a kestrel? So, if you're a North American ABA area birder, we have two small falcons, American kestrel and Merlin. And this is obviously a small falcon, although I don't know how obvious that is. It could be a large falcon. It's hard to judge anything on this, but the
legs look kind of dainty, and the bird just looks overall dainty.
Yeah. So why is this not a kestrel?
Okay, well, it's the combination. We worked through it the same way we worked through the purple sandpiper. Mm-hmm. The combination of color and pattern on this bird is never shown at the same time. Oh, there's my dog running.
Your dog just popped in. Yeah.
Sammy is running around. A kestrel with a blue back would be a male, and a male kestrel has a bright rufous tail.
Yeah.
So you'll never get a kestrel with a blue-gray back and a blue-gray tail. And when a female kestrel has a banded tail like this, but it's not gray and dark, it's not two shades of gray, it's gray and rufus or brown.
And kestrels in general, just if we're going by shape, have a much longer tail in comparison to their body size as well. I mean, Merlin is one of those extremely compact falcons, whereas kestrels are very long, lanky, long wings, long tail. They look kind of very slight, whereas Merlins are very, I don't know, substantial in their stature. Like this is a chunky little falcon. And, they're about the same size, but their mass, their weight is quite different. Like a Merlin is a much heavier bird. And when they're moving, as obviously this bird is not, it shows up much more because Merlin's very matter of fact, point A, I keep hitting my microphone, point A to point B direct, whereas a Kestrel will kind of flit around a little bit more.
Yeah. And when you see them in life flying and moving around, Merlin kind of is reminiscent of a tiny peregrine because they have very similar feeding habits.
Their build is similar too.
They come zooming in and they catch other small birds, birds smaller, or in the case of peregrine, larger than themselves. And they just overpower them with sheer force. Mm-hmm. Kestrel is a bird that makes its living by hovering over fields and open areas, snagging insects like dragonflies in the air or grasshoppers, taking the occasional mice. And very rarely will it go after, much more rarely than the other things will it go after small birds. It's like, Kestrels will go up there and kite dragonflies all day and ignore goldfinches. Yeah. When it gets cold in the winter, then they'll start taking goldfinches.
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly right. And look, this bird, look at that expression. That bird means business. That is not a bird you want to mess with. And that is a very Merlin attitude, generally speaking.
Yeah, all falcons have
yeah, the falcons in general have attitude in spades. Yeah, so that is all we've got in terms of images. If anyone has any questions about birds or birding or any of that, please send them our way. I'm trying to keep an eye on the various social media channels. John Lowry asks again on Twitter, have purple sandpipers caused more dangerous birding situations than any other bird? It's got to be up there, right?
It's got to be up there.
Birders out there waiting on slick rocks above raging oceans. I can imagine that being a rather.
I know of one photographer who fell into the rocks head first, upside down, and got stuck and couldn't get out as the tide was coming in.
Was that in New Jersey?
I think it was, and it was just a matter of luck that somebody else came walking along and saw his feet sticking up, or else he would have drowned. Yeah, so be careful out there.
Yeah, please don't kill yourself for purple sandpiper photos, as neat as they are.
Yeah.
Chris Ortega says he would love it if we could spend some more time on gulls. Perhaps next time. That's really more of a winter thing. I'm sure that as the cold weather comes, then we will see a lot more gull photos on What's This Bird. That tends to be the What's This Bird pattern. We'll see gulls soon enough. We'll make a shout out to the American.
We will see gulls soon enough.
We will see gulls soon enough. Yeah.
That's low even for you. I mean, God.
Yes. So I will make a shout out before we get too far. If you enjoy these sorts of programs with Greg and I chatting about birds, please consider joining the American Birding Association. You can go to aba.org/join. We are a membership organization. We provide all sorts of free resources, not only these sort of live What's This Bird things, but also the American Birding Podcast, tons of bird ID articles that you can find on the ABA's website that Greg has been working on a ton. Ted Floyd has a bi-weekly column. We have a lot of stuff. There's a lot of free bird stuff out there that the ABA provides, and if you enjoy that and would like to help us, please consider joining the ABA. And,
think of us as public radio or public television. We bring you a lot of stuff, and your membership dollars keep us going, and we
literally
need that.
John,
so it's aba.org/join. We did talk about Ruddy Duck and Black Scoter.
Ruddy Duck and Black Scoter. Black Scoter is on the ocean, and Ruddy Duck's on the pond.
Well, we're at a solid hour here, so I think we're just about ready to wrap it up.
I think so too. We've got a couple other things to do this evening. In fact, later today we are recording a thing for the Lower Rio Grande Valley Bird Festival. if you're interested in that, please go to Lower Rio or just Rio Grande Valley Bird Festival on Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, and check it out. The festival is obviously not going to be in person, but there's going to be a lot of online stuff.
It'll
that's
be
free,
happening,
I think, too.
a week from today.
You'll be on the 13th. We're gonna do. If you are anyone out there of an age where they remember Hollywood Squares, the game show, we are going to do a version of that called Harlingen Squares with a number of your favorite birding quasi-celebrities hosted by ABA President Jeff Gordon. We're going to have some fun people there. Jeff
And
Boughton, Jason Ward, Hannah and Eric from Hannah and Eric Go Birding Podcast, things like that, all going to be involved. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And if you've been to the Lower Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival, I think 2016, 17, 18 or something like that, you've seen us do it live on stage.
Yeah, so we're going to do it. We're going to do it on Zoom. Harlingen Zoom Squares. So check that out. Otherwise, go to aba.org/join and consider joining the ABA. We'd certainly love to have you. And that's about all we got. I'm gonna say goodbye, Greg, and
I'm gonna say goodbye, Nate.
Later. And take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yep. See you later.
Adios.
Bye-bye.